It's so true. It's way too early to start most seeds here in Zone 5. And it's also true that it's never too soon to start delicious microgreens in your life. Admittedly, we grow microgreens from October all the way till we're starting seeds in earnest in April. And so we're enjoying these glorious greens all winter long, and you can too. And welcome to live Q&A here at Fruition. And I am so delighted to share this beautifully bitter cold February morning with you. So dive right in, don't be shy, and I love to begin all of our live Q&As with a story, song, quote, poem with something to ground us in our time together. And this morning, some words from Audrey Lorde. And happy belated birthday, Audrey. We love you. Her words are these: caring for myself is not an act of self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Once again, caring for myself is not an act of self-indulgence. It is an act of self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And political warfare in the best possible sense, right? Political as in it's public, as in it's all of us. We are taking care of all of us. And how are we nourishing ourselves with these calories, with this spirit, with our minds? Welcome, Pancho. So glad you're here to join us. So yes, I am delighted to bring Audrey Lorde's words to our morning and to welcome you to our morning. So I'm going to dive right in, and don't be shy. Jill says, good morning, Petra. So nice to see you today. So nice to, see you across the 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 8-dimensional ether, Jill. And when will ginger be available? March 1st. Put on your calendar, March 1st is when we will be offering our ginger on our website officially. And then as soon as we have a window that it's not freezing cold, we will be tucking them in the mail. So it'll probably be in the second week of March, maybe mid-March, we'll see. But yeah, we'll wait for there to be a 3 to 4 day window of it being above freezing so that we can send you the ginger to start without it freezing. And Martina says, I have the best microgreens right now. Tempted to pull a few and replant for some beets. Possible? Oh man, anything is possible. Yeah, it sounds like you want to regrow microgreens in the same soil, and that is always an option. I love to be sure that I'm removing as much of the roots of the microgreens as possible because, and here's a fun, crazy fact. So seeds, when they germinate, such magic. When they germinate, they actually send out a radical first, a root first, and then the shoot emerges. So although above the ground, microgreens don't look like much, below the ground, much more is going on. So of course they don't have extensive root systems, but they do have some. And as soon as those root systems are disconnected from that photosynthesizing life above, they start to decompose. And so those decomposing roots, if you don't remove those from the soil underneath as you're reusing your soil, then that can actually harbor some bacteria, fungus. It can harbor rot and mold much more readily. I love you, Poncho. So yes, just be sure that you are reusing your soil. If you have great soil to begin with, you can always add some extra compost. You can add a teaspoon or so of our DIY potting mix minerals, and that way you're just constantly enriching the soil. While microgreens don't need that much nutrients, they also will, they're just a reflection of what they're grown in. So the more nutrient dense potting mix you offer for them, the more nutrient dense they will be, the more nutrient density will be also a part of your body, and however else you're continuing to bless the world with that abundance. So yes, we love, love, love to make sure that we have great organic, really nutrient dense potting mix for all of our seedlings especially, but even our microgreens. And dun da da, I know I missed a few questions, so I don't want to miss them. I received a glorious box of goodness from Fruition. Woohoo! Woo! I'm excited to make my own soil blocker seed starting mix with your blend. Any special tips to share on that? Oh my gosh, it's super easy. So yeah, when you have we have our DIY starting minerals to make your own potting mix. And we do have our Fort V amazing our compost-based organic seed starting mix it's our potting mix that we plant. We start over 10,000 seedlings in it every year. So it's our go-to, and we love to share that with you too. But that's a big bag, and it's, not inexpensive. And so we have another option that is much more economical, which is this lovely little bottle of essentially the minerals that are the expensive part of potting mix and are not generally in potting mix, so that we live in a highly capitalized, colonized society where if we can make the cheapest product possible and send it and sell it for the top dollar, then that means that we're making a profit, and yay. Oh goodness. So that's why most potting mix is not nearly as expensive and also not nearly as good. So this lovely little bottle of essentially the organic minerals that are mostly not in potting mix. You can just augment any potting mix with that, but you can also make your own. There's a recipe on the back. So just follow those instructions. It's basically getting just a few really inexpensive, readily available ingredients, and then just in a big enough container so that you can be making your own mix. It's so fun. So thanks so much for asking, Amy. I'm so excited for you, and don't be shy. And oh my gosh, I love odd questions, Molly. Molly asks, this is an odd question. I can't wait for it. Some of my warm, loving plants, yucca and aloe, have developed mold in their soil. What's the best way to help them? Dump out the pots, wash the roots, repot? Wow. Honestly, I'm A, so sorry, and B, I'm not entirely sure exactly what's going on, so I don't feel I'm in the perfect place of authority to be sharing anything really, but especially on that. I would replace the soil. I don't know about washing the roots, but if I would take a look, and I would, rather than just dumping it out, I would go in with an archaeologist sense of like, how far, what does this look like, and how far is this going down into the soil, and is there anything that you can see that it might be related to, and if it is like touching roots, active roots of your yuccas and aloes, are those roots looking like they're affected by it? Trimming the roots would be better than washing the roots. If you can see that there's damage, like it's brown, for example, if the roots are brown and soft and like rotting rather than white and alive and firm, then washing the roots isn't going to help, but trimming those roots could help a lot. So those are some highly amateur suggestions for you, and just sending love to your aloes and your yuccas. I recently had a calancho that bit the proverbial dust, and I'm very sad about it, but luckily there was a lovely pup that she was harboring, so I'm hopeful that pup on her outermost leaf will continue to enjoy the tradition of living with us. And Michelle says, just used your soil blocking mix with the DIY mix this morning for alpine strawberry seeds. It worked perfectly. Yes, amazing. Hooray. I do want to mention with that DIY mix, if you're augmenting it with if you're augmenting pre-existing potting mix with it, that's awesome for things like cell trays and for peat pots, cow pots, for microgreens. But if you're specifically interested in the soil blocking aspect, definitely follow the recipe, because you really want something that is either about 50, that high percentage of coconut coir or peat moss. And as much as it breaks my heart, because those two ingredients are very not renewable. And certainly peat moss is less renewable than coconut coir. But nonetheless, both of those, so we're always experimenting, trying to figure out what is the next ingredient. Because here's the thing, for soil blocking, you want to be able to have that potting mix compress while still maintaining abundant pore space, abundant air space. And so other kinds of materials are just going to compress, but they won't have the air that is really necessary for the roots to be able to grow and also to just have a gas exchange. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Michelle. And Marca says, I've been battling whitefly on my seedlings. I have a rough yellow sticky traps, but it's been rough. You know, here's a couple of thoughts. So often, whether it's fungus gnats or whiteflies, if you let your soil dry out in between waterings, that will dramatically decrease the ability of those insects' life cycles to cycle. So it seems counterintuitive. Often people overwater more than underwater their seedlings. And especially if you're not letting the top millimeter, it doesn't have to be much, it can't be much really, but that top millimeter of the soil needs to get crispy dry, and then you water it again, and it's that dryness that is going to break the life cycle of so many, whether it's algae that's wanting to grow, the whiteflies, the fungus gnats, and so it's always better. Prevention is the best cure across the board. So it's best if you are just going to be starting your seedling soon, keep that watering tip in mind, and bottom watering rather than overhead watering is always the dream too. So I am so sorry, Marca, that you have whiteflies, but I hope that little tip helps. And it might take a week for their life cycle to, for you to see that that things are shifting. But I really, really, I hope that they do for you, my friend. And Amanda says, my first year growing in the Finger Lakes, and I am so excited to try my hand at celery. When is the best time to start it? So much fun. Well, welcome to the Finger Lakes, Amanda. I can't wait to share our farm with you post-pandemic days. Don't be a stranger. And we start celery at the beginning of April, the same time that we sow our tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, anything that needs that 8 weeks before final frost. That's our window. And check it out. If you haven't already seen, we have these lovely little planting calendars, and it's a baby encyclopedia, really. They have all these different crop types, and you'll see months across the top and all those different colors. There's a little key on the bottom, and there's direct sow if you transplant, if you can do either, when you can anticipate harvesting, all in zones 4 through 6. And we send these lovely little postcards out in every one of our orders. And we also, you can find it on our website and download it for free. So you don't even have to purchase from us to enjoy it. And you'll find the full version of it, plus our direct sowing and transplanting charts in Rise and Shine, which Rise and Shine, this is an old copy actually, but we have a brand new copy edition freshly arrived. And so you'll find tons of great info in here, including those, here's soil blocking in 5 easy steps, and so much about whether you're starting indoors or outdoors, lots of great tips. And this is a beautiful paper version. You can also find this free as a 40-page ebook that is a PDF you can download on our website as well. So tons of great info to set you up for success and surround you with abundance, and a small token of our great fondness for you, friends. So yes, Donna says, does that mean you also recommend removing roots from our outdoor gardens? Oh, you're growing microgreens in an outdoor garden. I've actually never done that. So, I wouldn't worry about it so much in an outdoor garden. In an outdoor garden, you're probably loosening the soil a little bit anyway. You're incorporating more compost. There's biological activity in your outdoor garden that just isn't in a seed starting or a microgreens tray indoors. So because this situation, it's much more of a like there just aren't the loops to close loops, and so any root isn't going to decompose and be readily taken up into the next life form that it will be. It's just going to sit and stagnate and take down other life forms with it. So yeah, if you're growing microgreens outdoors, just harvest them and then, you know, prepare the soil as you would for your beets or anything else that you're planting, and dive right in. Don't do anything special on the microgreen root account. And Elizabeth Ann says, I have 8 raised beds. Amazing. You are so fortunate, my friend. 30 inches deep. I have access to a lot of used coffee grounds by the 5-gallon bucket. Can I add too much and hurt my soil? Oh yes, so easily. Coffee grounds are impressively acidic. So I highly recommend not putting any of those directly in your soil, but creating a huge, beautiful compost pile out of them. And keep in mind that you want to, and check out, we have a compost micro course, my mini course on our website as well. You want to be balancing your brown and green materials, right? Your carbon and your nitrogen-based materials. So tons and tons and tons of carbon in those coffee grounds, as well as acids. Those acids are going to really hurt your soil if you put it right on your raised beds, but if you compost it, those acids will naturally find their next life in another less acidic life form, which is the beautiful thing about life. And so yes, make yourself a tremendous compost pile, compost them, and once those coffee grounds don't smell like coffee, don't look like coffee, just look and smell like deep loam earth, then they're ready for all of your beautiful raised beds. And Jill says, Molly, I don't know if this is the best way, but I just scoop out the mold and keep going. They always seem to survive. That's great advice. I hope that helps too. And Susan asks, good morning. Good morning, Susan. Where can we find the 20-row trays? Do you sell them on your site? Thanks. Yeah, so we have some seed starting stuff on our website, and they are 72 trays that essentially look like this. And you'll find them in our 101 seed starting collection. And yeah, so they are very handy. And I'm really, check out our Seed Starting Academy, because there are tons and tons and tons of videos about, the pros and cons of all different containers. And we also have a bunch. I know you're a fresh member of our Flourish Garden Club, and we have a bunch of wonderful videos in our Flourish Garden Club talking about that as well. And yeah, I can't wait to share them with you, my friend, and set you up for success. We don't share them as individuals, though, just because the shipping, it doesn't make any sense. It's kind of crazy to ship them as individuals, but we do have them in a larger collection. And thanks so much for asking, Susan. And Jill says, adding on to Elizabeth Ann's question, we drink a lot of tea. What is too much to go in the garden? Great question. Well, tea is not nearly as acidic as coffee. So I honestly would also not recommend putting anything right on your garden. If you're drinking tea, if you're chopping off the end of an onion and throwing it in your compost, throw it in your compost. Let it decompose there and become there. So whether it's tea, coffee, moldy bread, whatever you have. Of course, if it's a small compost pile, you don't want to put on, cheese. You don't want to put on bones. If it's a much larger, more robust compost pile, and you don't have a dog that's going to be highly intrigued, and you don't want to attract skunks to your neighborhood, they will compost there, but there might be some other reasons to do other things with them. But yes, compost it all first, and that is the way to go. That includes your eggshells as well. And Brianna says, I've never started chives from seed. They're about 2 inches tall now. At what height should I pot them up? Great question. It's less about height and more about just, and here's where I wish I had some plants, and we will starting in April, so I can really share with you. It's not about height, because height can very easily be a function of stress. And then that could be not helpful for the plant. So rather than height, look at leaves. So it's trickier with chives. It's easier to imagine with something like these radishes or like tomatoes. They have their first primordial leaves that come up, and those are the cotyledons. And so imagine a peanut. Kind of there's the two halves of the peanut, right? And so when the peanut actually germinates, when the bean actually germinates, when any dicot seed germinates, it sends up those first two primordial leaves. So let's take a look here at this lovely little purple radish. And yum! So here we have the cotyledons, quintessential brassica cotyledons. And emerging from that, and you can just barely see, there's the tiniest little apical bud emerging. And so that is the growth point. And that's where the first true leaves will be emerging. Oh my gosh. If you don't already grow microgreens, I can't recommend it highly enough. Or maybe it's time for lunch already. But so when it comes to other plants and deciding when to pot up, you want to be looking at those apical buds. And if you are growing in those cell trays or in 6-packs, once you have 2 sets of true leaves, it's time to pot up into a 4-inch container. And so your goal, right, is to just keep your plants on the closest to a 90-degree growth curve as you can. You want them to not be stressed. You want them to just keep growing, and not too fast, but you don't want to stunt their growth at any point either. So with chives, it's a little trickier because the true leaves as a monocot, the true leaves of your chives, onions, leeks, are going to essentially look the same as that first initial leaf to come up. But once you have 3, 4, 5 little sprouts coming up, then transfer them into a larger container. And just when, in general, err on the side of potting up early and often. It's really easy to stress plants out, especially little seedlings in little tiny containers. And so erring on the side of early and often, potting them up will just, they're kind of like us. If I'm getting thirsty, I am experiencing the sensation of thirst after my body is already dehydrated, right? And so once your seedlings are starting to show signs of stress, they're already pretty stressed. So it's harder to retroactively make them healthier. Really, you can't. So it's always better to pot them up early and just be doing whatever you can to kind of circumvent any sadness that they might be experiencing. And once they get more than 5-6 inches tall, you want to trim them back down to that 4 or 5 inch range. So that's not true for anything except the chives, leeks, and onions, anything in that allium family. And honestly, it's perfect time to sow onions and leeks. So if you haven't already heard, we're sharing weekly free sowing and growing webinars now through the end of May, and we're focusing on a different plant each week. So this upcoming Monday, we're diving deep into onions and leeks, and it's actually the perfect time to be sowing onions and leeks now. Mid-February to mid-March here in Zone 5 is perfect for sowing them. And so you can actually sow them right along with me. I'm going to be sowing them live, and so can you on Monday night. And even if you can't join us live, when you register, you will get the free replay and the instant replay. And I'm so looking forward to sharing it with you. It's a huge, huge joy to be able to share all this info and to sow seeds together. So yes, register for free and jump right in. And Tracy Ann says, ordered for the first time. Woohoo! So happy to buy at Grown in the Finger Lakes. Purchase snow peas, Brussels sprouts, August ambrosia watermelon. Yes! Thyme, rose Bernay tomatoes. Can't wait to start the seeds. Plan to start in about 3 weeks. Is that good timing? For some of those things, no. And for others of those things, no. It's a little early for all of those things, except potentially, depending on the weather, the peas. Although considering we have almost 2 feet of snow outside, I love it. That probably will be too early for them too. So here's the thing. Tracy, take a look. Oh my gosh. Yes, I do have a packet. So take a look on the back on the backs of our packets. We have growing info, and we have a little quick reference guide on the side, and it'll say, you know, plant spacing after thinning and transplant only, and days to germination with the temperature, so handy, and when to sow. And sometimes it'll say early spring, but other times it will say 6 to 8 weeks before final frost. So that you really want to take to heart. And also, if you haven't already, check out our Rise and Shine Starting Seeds with Ease. This is our 40-page ebook. Oh, well, it's a book. Actually, our latest edition just arrived yesterday, and they're gorgeous. They're so beautiful. And you can get our free PDF of this as an ebook that you can print off at home. That's like black and white and very handy. So that's totally free. But if you'd like the whole beautiful, you know, bells and whistles with all the colors and spiral bound, we have these on our website. And you'll see, like, here's our direct sow chart. So that has all kinds of great info. And rather than being like early frost or early spring, which is pretty nebulous in terms of timing, and it also isn't dates, because that's not relevant for people, you know, outside our region. And also with the climate changing, that's not especially helpful. So although the final frost date is always it's anybody's guess, we're going by that and then working back for a certain number of weeks. So for example, your snow peas just want to be direct sown right in the ground pretty soon after snow melt, honestly. Anytime then through mid-May is the perfect timing for them. And then your Brussels sprouts, you want to start them about 6 weeks before final frost. We'll be starting those in mid-April. And August ambrosia watermelon, we're going direct in the ground. Watermelon, cucumber, zucchini, that cucurbit family, they despise being transplanted. Their root systems, for whatever reason, are very sensitive, and they're very prone to disruption. And so any disturbance of like being transplanted, even if they're being transplanted in something like a peat pot or a soil block, you just really want to be sure that they've barely germinated before you're planting them in that context. And direct sowing them, I can't tell you how many times I have sown a zucchini seed 2 feet away from a 10-day-old little transplant in a soil block, and then watched as the direct sown seed is healthier, growing more vigorously, and fruiting more abundantly, and often earlier. But sometimes the stress of the plant that had its roots disturbed will root first, but then there's not nearly as much fruit. So, which is all to say, direct sow your Rose de Bernay, direct sow your August ambrosia watermelon after frost and once the soil is warm. So honestly, that first week of June is fabulous. If you really want to go a little earlier, at the end of May is great, but the warmer the soil is, the happier that watermelon will be. And we generally plant her at the beginning of June, and we're generally harvesting August ambrosia watermelon by the end of July, early August at the latest. So I know it's counterintuitive that we live in a short season and we need to get ahead of the season, but planting plants in ways that makes them stressed just makes them less abundant. So it's that 1 step forward, 2 steps back phenomena really quickly. And your thyme and your tomatoes, you want to start the first week in April. And stay tuned for our sowing and growing webinars, because we'll be sowing our tomatoes together during that webinar. And we'll be sowing our thyme and our oregano and our lavender together in that time period too. So I can't wait for you to join us in those webinars, and don't be shy, and can't wait to share our farm with you too one day, Tracy Ann. And Jill says, is that an aloe right over your shoulder? Oh my gosh, that is actually an agave. It's an agave, I think like what makes tequila. It's a same genus and a different subspecies. But yeah, I love agaves, and I love aloes too, and we happen to have quite a few. Thanks for asking. And yeah, this is live Q&A, and I'll take just a couple more questions, friends. I'm so delighted to share this time this morning with you, and these microgreens too. And Jenna says, I have red kale and purple radish coming up. I followed your microgreens advice and I'm loving it. Thank you. Oh, that's such great news. I'm delighted. Thank you so much for sharing. And keep in touch and don't be shy. And one question about planting ginger. The top trays I have, two sections. Would it be better to look for one that is all one open area? Honestly, yeah, if you're growing quite a bit and we just planted an wide open flat. But if I don't entirely follow your question. If it's bisected and you have two big open sections, honestly, I think that's fine. So it's more like ginger doesn't like to be constricted at all. So if it's like less than a 6-inch wide container, you're just gonna be a little sad about it. Specifically, you'll be sad because your ginger will be sad about it. So feel free to send us a picture and we can evaluate. But it sounds like if it's a great big tray like this and it's just in 2 sections, that will be just fine and set you up for success. And Jalen says, Petra, good morning. Good morning. Sunshine, I'm gaining courage to try soil blocking for the first time this spring. Can you talk to me about potting up sequences for tomato babies, the size of seedlings, pots, timing? Totally. Well, I also will just, shamelessly plug our sowing and growing webinar series in that first week in April, which is when we start sowing our tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. We'll be diving in and doing this step by step with you all. So we start with our mini blocks, and oh yes, I have one right here. So we start with our mini blocker, and these are amazing because 20 little lives, and you can see the little kind of spheres in the middle. Those are essentially little dimples so that it creates a little cavity, a little nest for your seeds. So you sow 1 tomato seed in each of these, and they can live literally a 1/4 inch above your heat mat, so they germinate in a fraction of the time. Heat mats are just brilliant. And then once these germinate, right, there is hardly any soil in there, right? They're tiny little cubes. There's hardly any soil. So as soon as you see them beginning to emerge, that's when you'll pot them up into your large potting, or your larger soil block. And you'll want to make sure that soil blocks generally have these, larger dimples in them. They also can be popped out, and you can insert these we have them on our website, like the inserts that are like little plastic squares, so that they essentially have a hole in the top of the mini block, of the large block, so the mini blocker can just seamlessly pot up right into it. So seedlings emerge. Literally, cotyledons emerge. Okay, potting up from mini block into your larger block. And if you're starting in a 6-pack or in a cell tray, you'll let this stage grow at the same rate. Once you have the second set of true leaves emerging from your soil block, from your cell tray, from your 6-pack, that's when you need to pot up your tomatoes, peppers, eggplants into a 4-inch container. And if your 4-inch container is growing more than a 4th set of true leaves, then it's really important that you pot them up again. Potting up early and often is so critical. So thanks for asking, and I know that's not a whole lot of info, a nutshell of a speed race of a response, but I can't wait to share so much more and join our free sewing and growing webinar series so that we can actually be doing that at length and in person together, as much as we can be in person on Zoom. But it's so much fun to be able to sow seeds together. And George says, I put everything on my compost and let the chickens sort everything out. Yes, chickens are so very good at that. And Susan asks, can the August ambrosia watermelon be grown vertically on a trellis with support? Short on space here. Absolutely. So yes, you can totally train watermelon up. So a watermelon, historically in Africa, its whole situation is that it's vining so that it can trellis itself, growing up trees. Isn't that amazing? And that same is true for winter squash and summer squash. That like bush habit of a zucchini, of a bush acorn squash, for example, is a very modern trait. All of these crops are vining so that they can climb up more woody stemmed plants so that they can get their share of the sunlight. So, of course, the larger the fruit is, so they've been, fruiting above in the air for millions of years. On the other hand, it's nice to give them a little bit of structure when they're actually fruiting, because some watermelon and August ambrosia, especially if you are really feeding her abundantly, she's often 4 to 6 pounds, but we often harvest 12-pound watermelons sometimes. She can get much larger. So if you can offer her fruit a little bit more support, like actually, taking some fabric. Oh, hi, Poncho. I'm so glad you've joined us. Yes. And tying that to the support, one side, so that you're like creating kind of a hammock for your nest. And that is a wonderful way for you to grow watermelon vertically and be totally confident that those watermelon aren't going to fall off your plant at an inopportune moment. And Elizabeth Ann says, pumpkins. We are in a residential area but have a lot of space. I want to let my pumpkins do as they please. Do I need to protect them from predators or just let them go? Sometimes they will get munched by little voles, and it's so true. Or like a groundhog. They won't be bothered by many other mammals or other things, but groundhogs totally will munch if they are very close at hand to your pumpkins. So keep that in mind. But otherwise, I am so excited for you, and I'm so glad that you are going to be growing glorious pumpkins in your neighborhood. And our final question is, Elizabeth, I'm considering sending a gift of seeds to someone in California, along with the Rise and Shine book. You are so thoughtful, Elizabeth. Can I assume that the book would apply to growing in Northern California? Totally. So here's our Rise and Shine book, and they're beautiful. I'm so glad your friend will get the latest edition. They just arrived yesterday. And take a look at, here's this direct sow chart. There's also a transplanting chart. And when to sow is not by specific date. It says earliest sowing date, and then for beans, after frost. Beet, about 4 weeks before last frost. Calendula, 2 to 3 weeks before last frost. Down here we have pumpkins after frost. So this is the direct sow chart, right? For our transplanting chart, it'll say, tomatoes 6 to 8 weeks before last frost. So it's not based on dates, as in like how we sow in the Finger Lakes. It's based on time and approximating before that frost date. And so it's relevant if you live in Alaska or down in Panama. So thank you for asking, and thank you for sharing. And have no doubt, you are such a gift to the world, and your generosity and vision are exactly the healing balm that this world needs more than ever right now. So thanks again for joining me, friends, and I'm joining me and these delicious microgreens. So I would love to share with you some final thoughts. I love to begin and end all of our live Q&As with a story, song, poem, with something, and this morning some words from the marvelous Audre Lorde. And happy belated birthday, Audre. And thank you for sharing these wonderful words of wisdom with us. Caring for myself is not an act of self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Once again, caring for myself is not an act of self-indulgence. It is an act of self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And let's break that down. Political, in its broadest sense, simply means our public lives together. And so it's not personal, it's political, it's public how we take care of ourselves. So whether it's nourishing ourselves with greens, nourishing ourselves by gifting friends in faraway places seeds they can nourish themselves with, there are so many ways that we can be taking care of ourselves. And this is one of the most foundational ways to transform ourselves into more joyful, healthy beings, and to transform our world and dismantle these systems that are not set up for our health and our happiness and our public responsibility to take care of each other. So thank you, friends, for knowing that you and every one of the seeds that you sow matter more than we will ever know. Sending love from our snowy gardens to yours and our burgeoning green trays of microgreens to yours. Don't be shy. Till next time.